Hey everyone, we want to welcome you again for another one of our live streams as we continue our conversation on Israel, Palestine, Gaza, the West Bank, and really the crisis that happened that began 1 year ago today. My name is Rob Dalrymple. Thank you so much for joining us today. I'm going to have a number of guests coming on, so I'll do my best to frame the conversation a little bit where we're at, and then I really want to hear from them as well. So as you probably well know, 1 year ago today, Hamas operatives, the terrorists, whatever you wish to call them, broke through the security barrier that keeps them in the Gaza Strip and wreak havoc on the people of just outside the kibbutzim, and of course a film festival where a bunch of young people were there. 1,000 or more Israelis were killed that day. 252, I think the number is, were taken captives back to Gaza. And of course that night we knew that this was not going to go well for everyone there. You know, one of the things I would say is this, is that we've said from the beginning on this live stream and others as well, that our message as the church is to advocate for peace and to advocate for justice, especially a just peace. You see, it's really easy to justify killing someone if you make them the other and you label them as unworthy of life or terrorists or whatever it might be. And I'm going to do my best here to navigate the controls, so if you'll bear with me as well. Let me share with you one of the pictures that I like to share here. This is on my Facebook page. I posted it a while ago. This is two young children, and you can see them shaking uncontrollably. And this little sister comes up, and just you can see the shrapnel on their faces. They've just survived a bombing, and look at this unbelievable little kiss of this. I'm assuming it's his sister there. You know, it's easy to justify killing someone, but as soon as you humanize them, as soon as you make them individuals, people like us, moms and dads, sons and daughters, you begin to realize that this is not just a war. This is something more significant than that, and that children are dying and children are suffering. So I think it's important that we see these faces, whether they're Israeli faces, whether they're Palestinian faces, people in Gaza, people in Lebanon, people in Iran, Jews in Israel, whatever it may be. One of the things that we've encouraged you to do from the beginning is to go meet people. Go meet Israelis, go meet Palestinians, go meet Jews in your neighborhood, go find the local synagogue and meet them. Go to the local mosque and see if you can just visit and talk with Muslims. Meet Palestinians. They're in your neighborhood. They're in your communities. That they are there, and meet them. You know, Tony and I, my wife and I have been blessed over the years to have Israelis and Palestinians stay in our home and just spend the night with us, have dinner. We've stayed in Muslim homes in Bethlehem. I've stayed in Palestinian homes and Christian homes. We've eaten in Israeli homes. We've done Bible studies in Israeli rabbis' homes. You know, and when you meet these people, you begin to realize that they are human beings just like us. So again, of course, we must be careful about demonizing the other and making this a war about the other. So the most recent estimates, of course, now are that 42,500 people in Gaza have died. These numbers, I'll speak to them in just a minute, are very legitimate numbers. They're probably very accurate. And if anything, there might be actually underestimates of what actually has transpired. 1,139 Israelis were killed. 726 IDF died. 90,000 or more have been injured in Gaza. 97 hostages is the last count that I heard remain in Gaza. 7 of them are Americans. And 1/3 of them are feared actually to be dead. Of the remaining hostages. 10,000 IDF soldiers have reported injuries, and 1/3 of them have reported mental health concerns and mental health issues. There are now 17,000 orphans in Gaza. As I said at the beginning here, these numbers are likely an underestimate of what the real facts is. The people in Gaza, Hamas doesn't probably want the numbers to be too inflated because it makes them look like, what are we doing here? We're sacrificing all these lives. And of course, the more people that die in Gaza, the more it looks how bad Israel's doing. You know, I had a live stream. We've done a series of live streams here, and I had 2 Jewish friends on to talk about antisemitism and what's going on there, and tell us what it means to be a Jewish person at a time like this, and what's happening there, and the trauma that you're experiencing there. And I think it's real, and we have to understand that. We have to understand what they're going through. But one of the questions I asked them was, do you believe that Israel's response to Hamas and the terror attack of October 7th, do you believe that that response has actually increased anti-Semitism in your communities and around the world? And they didn't directly answer my question, but they did answer my question. The rabbi that I had on, a Messianic rabbi, said, he says, Rob, at the time, this was in July, I gave the number of 37,000 that were dead. He says, Rob, when you say 37,000 are dead, he says, that's when people want to show up at my synagogue and burn it down. Now, I wasn't having them on to be arguing or contentious about the numbers, so I didn't respond. But my thought at that moment was, oh, so if the number's only 20,000, they won't show up at your synagogue and burn it down? I mean, the point was, the number of people that are dead in Gaza, is that causing anti-Semitism to increase? And he said, basically, yes. When we say 37,000, now if he said that to kind of be contend with my number, that he didn't agree with the number. The number is very accurate. We know that when Hamas releases numbers at the end of wars like this, and Israel gives numbers at the end of wars like this, they're almost always very similar. So the numbers are very likely accurate. But my point was that if the number's 20,000, they're still going to show up at your synagogue to burn it down. And I think that's part of the point that we're saying here. This is a very complex issue, and there's people on all sides, and the church simply needs to be advocating for justice and for a just solution. The problem is that this issue is so politicized. We have American politicians this is a bipartisan issue in the American Congress, that you simply support Israel or you simply don't get reelected. I wrote 2 blogs over the summer about 2 state representatives, one in June that was running for reelection in a primary reelection, and was not reelected because an Israeli support group, a political action group, gave $14 million to help his opponent running a campaign against him. He didn't get reelected. In early August, a woman, I think from Missouri, that guy was from New York City, I believe. A woman, I think was from Missouri, was running for reelection. She has a phenomenal story. She was homeless for a while. She's done amazing things in Congress. But both of these representatives have spoken up against Israel's attack on Gaza as like, this is too much. Israel gave, I think it was $8 million, this political action group, to help her opponent run against her and make sure that they didn't get reelected. So this is an issue that our Congress is simply going to take only one side on. We've said from the very beginning that this is the way it's going to be. Biden has been the most Zionist and pro-Israel president we've had in our history. And what that means is that we have to be careful about the information that's actually coming to us. Because what happens with propaganda and narratives is that we believe the narratives that we really want to believe. Let's just be honest. We often believe what we want to believe. And when we believe what we want to believe, and I hear a narrative that says we're the good guys and they're the bad guys, I believe that side of the narrative. So all the Palestinians are horrible. They elected Hamas, and therefore they need to be eradicated. It's like, it doesn't matter even if they did elect Hamas or not, and they did. They're human beings. They're made in the image of God. And because of that, they're beings of value. And I've argued that we can't justify the slaughtering of so many civilians, and that this is actually not going to be good for Israel either. Now, the next problem that complicates this issue is the fact that you have the theological convictions of so many Christians that theologically believe that Israel is God's chosen people. God gave them this land, and therefore it's their land. And if we want to be blessed by God, we need to bless them. And if we want to be cursed by God, we need to curse them. It's a black and white issue for so many Christians. And now we've had a series of live streams, and I'm going to show you some of the resources that we have just so you understand where to access all the information that we have. Because we've had a series of live streams where we've addressed the theological issues, we've addressed the Jewish issues, we've addressed the Palestinian issues. We had Salim Anfus on to discuss why did the Gazans elect Hamas? What's going on there? We had Gary Burge on. We've had Bruce Fisk on to discuss the historical context of what's going on, what happened in Gaza, why is Gaza the way it is. We had Greg Khalil on. And I'm telling you right now, you need to watch the interview with Greg Khalil if you haven't already watched it. So let me do the best I can to navigate the website here and share my screen again. And by the way, this is an article that just came out today in Christianity Today about a group of us, myself and Bruce Fisk and a few others, who've been meeting for 5 years to discuss Israel, Palestine, people on both sides of the aisle. Some of our people in our group are Christian Zionists, and some of them are, like myself, not Christian Zionists. I don't like saying you're either pro-Israel or you're pro-Palestine. I just don't think that's fair. I don't think that's accurate. I am not like pro-Palestine at the expense of being pro-Israel. I think the best answer is I'm pro-Israel and pro-Palestine, but because I'm not only pro-Israel or theologically convicted of being pro-Israel, I'm often portrayed as being pro-Palestine, and I don't think that's fair. So let me stop sharing that there. Let me go back to here and Sure. Another one to that article just came out in Christianity Today. A couple other things we have going on here is this. Let me see, that one there, this one here. All right. So if you go to the determinedtruth.com website, you'll see that there are, let me stretch the page out a little bit better here. There are a number of tabs: the blog tab, the podcast tab, the YouTube tab. So if you click on the YouTube tab, it's going to take you to the YouTube page. And let me start do this here. And I'm not technologically savvy enough to know how to migrate from one page to the other, so it's going to be a little clumsy, and I apologize for that, but thank you for bearing with me here. If you go to the YouTube page, what you're going to see here on the Determined Truth YouTube page, obviously make sure you subscribe to the YouTube page. You'll be automatically notified, and you can see the bell here, so that means I get automatic alerts. But we have this playlist, and under the playlist, you can see we've had some discussions on abortion, the gospel and the kingdom, scriptures in the church, understanding the end times, politics in the church. But I want you to point out two in particular. One is this playline, Introduction to Israel-Palestine Conflict. I did, I think, 7 episodes discussing Israel-Palestine, 30 to 35 minutes or so, putting the historical context, the framework of the issues themselves. I think there were 3 episodes on the history of the conflict and a couple other episodes on the justice issues. What are the Israelis saying? What are the Palestinians saying? So I really want to encourage you to look at those if you just want an introduction to the Israel-Palestinian conflict. Then I want to encourage you to also look at this playlist down here, the Israel-Gaza war. And this playlist here, I don't think if I open it up, I'm not sure. Okay, yeah, you can see the same page. This playlist here has, I think, 25 to 32 videos that we've done since October 11th. Mercy Aiken, of course, is on here, which she's going to be coming on shortly there. Gary Burge will be coming on in just a little bit. Ben Norquist will be coming on shortly thereafter as well. You can see we've talked about the theology issues there. But this episode here with Greg Khalil, you have to listen to it. Greg was a legal advisor to the PLO from 2004 to 2008. I've said this before, but I just want to remind you of this. A legal advisor to the PLO during those years. And what happened with Greg is, those were the years when Israel decided to withdraw the settlements from Gaza. And Greg was negotiating with Condoleezza Rice and President Bush and the Prime Minister of England and the Israeli government. And everybody knew, Greg said, he knew then that if they don't make certain provisions, if Israel just simply withdraws and they blockade land, sea, and air and let those people sit in there and rot, it's going to blow up. And everybody knew that Gaza was going to blow up. It took till 2023 for it to happen. Everybody thought it would happen in 2020. But you're talking about a legal advisor who was on the inside, who said, I wrote about this, and I actually looked at this later, and I looked him up, and he sure did. 3 months after Israel withdrew from Gaza in August of 2005, Greg was quoted in the Virginia School of Law saying, this is not going to work out because they have not put the provisions in place to make sure the people in Gaza have the justice that they need. This is going to be a death camp ultimately, and it's going to blow up. So I really encourage you to do that. Now, the other thing, of course, is if you go to the blog site here, and thank you, we got a couple guests that are waiting on here. We're going to bring them on pretty quickly. But if you go to the blog site, let me again navigate my own technology here as I try to do this correctly. What I want you to notice is if you click on the blog tab on the website, it's going to take you to this page here, which discusses recent posts. I think the 10 most recent posts are there. And if you keep scrolling down, you're going to see playlists. And so these playlists will say any article I've written that I tabbed as Israel-Palestine or of Jesus or justice or eschatology in the end times, that's going to take you to that playlist. So that's one way to get to it. Another way to get to it, so this is a little bit more complicated, I apologize, but what happens is the blog that I write is actually hosted by Patheos. And so because it's hosted by Patheos, let me see here if I have that there. Oh, I don't have it. All right, let me see if I can do this. Let's see if this works. So I'm going to click on this. Just going to click on, it takes you to, this is to the Patheos site, and I believe you can see this now. So this is I just clicked on Israel-Palestine. What you can do on Patheos, up at the top, it has this archives tab. Now that archives tab brings us to here, and you can select categories. There's even more categories than what you'll find on the Determined Truth page there. And so you can see AIPAC, which is the Political Action Committee, antisemitism. Obviously, I've written a lot in the book of Revelation. So you can choose any of these topics there, and you can see all the tags that we've given there, and you can find all the arguments all the blogs that I've written on that as well. Now, the other thing that doesn't show up on my page, but when you first click on this page here, it's going to bring up a sign up for the newsletter thing. It's not a newsletter. You're not signing up to get spammed. All it is that every time I write a blog and post it, you'll actually automatically be notified by email. So you'll get an email in your inbox, which typically is on Mondays, but sometimes I post more than once a week. And you'll get an email with that blog in there. And of course, the blog's going to have advertisements because it's through Patheos and they do a lot of adverts. So just want to make you aware of some of the resources that we have and the things that are going on. Okay, really quickly, let me finish up with a couple thoughts here before we bring our first guest on. One of the first posts I wrote it October 7th, that night when later on that evening, I heard President Biden's speech. We have Israel's back, full stop. And I thought, oh no, this is not good. Because every time Israel's attacked Gaza, they have attacked Gaza with tenfold more fury than what the Palestinians did on Israel. And I knew if you're talking 1,000, at the time it was 1,400, I think, initially. We now know the number's about 1,137 Israelis that have passed away. I thought, this is going to be really bad. So I wrote a post. I don't think it came out to October 8th or October 9th. And I said, this is going to be really bad because Israel's going to respond with a tenfold fury. Now, in the next few days, we began to find out more on two things. One, we began to find out that Israel was stopping the water, the food, the electricity. We were speaking up about this. I spoke with May Cannon and a few others at a conference at Fuller Seminary that first week, saying this is collective punishment. This is a war crime. You can't punish civilians for what Hamas, a terrorist, whatever you want to call them, has done. This is not good. This can't go well, and not a good idea. But the other thing is this. I was in a conference call with a leading Jewish voices in the United States. And they began sharing what had happened on October 7th, at least what they thought had happened October 7th. And I was like, oh, this is way worse than I ever imagined. Babies being burned in ovens and women having their babies cut out of their stomachs and being killed and mass killing of babies and mass rape. And I thought, I wonder if I should take my article that I wrote a few days earlier down because, I didn't know that it was this bad. I realized that I thought, well, no, academic integrity, intellectual honesty says I keep the article up because that's what I said. I said Israel's going to respond with a tenfold more severe thing. This has to stop. We have to find a just peace for this right away. Well, over the course of time, we began finding out that only 2 babies in all of the 1,100 people that died, only 2 of them were infants. There were no women's bodies found where a baby was cut out of their womb. There were no babies found in ovens. One of the women had a baby in her arm that she was shot through the door and the safe room, and both the baby and the child died. And there was another child. I know Israel has a records. They have a list of every person that's died, and there were only 2 infants that died. We now know the rape allegations actually are very bogus. They've been disproven by a number of groups. Electronic Intifada is one. We had a live stream with Ali Abumana on the CFIP link there, and many others. The rape allegations are highly suspect. Those things simply aren't true. Now, that doesn't undermine in any way, shape, or form what Hamas did and the terror that it brought about on October 7th. But the response to Israel has simply gone too far. When I spoke with a number of leading voices on the Israel side, their answer was Israel has a right to defend itself, which I dealt with in a blog, I think even today's blog. And of course, not denying it has a right to defend itself, but of course the question becomes, do the people in Gaza have a right to defend themselves also? And I think that's an interesting part of the conversation that we don't often get to talk about. Second point was that Hamas has to be eradicated because Israel can't live in peace with Hamas. Now, I responded to a couple of individuals who made this claim by saying Hamas is an ideology. We had Jonathan Kutab on one of our live streams, and Jonathan's like, it's an ideology. You can't eradicate an ideology. There are 17,000 children that are now orphans as a result of Israel's attack. Guess what? How many of those children are going to become radicalized? And this is what Greg was talking about in my live stream with Greg. He's like, Rob, we're falling into a trap. Hamas is doing this to show how evil the West and how evil Israel is and how we're going to respond. And here we are now today. Not only has tenfold more people died, but we're close to 30-fold, maybe even close to 40-fold more people have died in Gaza. This has to stop. It's not good for Israel. It's not good for the Palestinians. It's not good for anyone. And we need to find a way to find a just peace for that. So I've said enough. I've got some guests in the waiting room. Let me bring on my first guest. Andrew, thank you so much for joining us today.
Hey.
I appreciate you. You're in the States now, right? Where are you at, Andrew?
I'm in the States right now, Rob. Yeah.
Okay. And so, Andrew, tell us a little bit about where you've been the last couple of years and what you're doing at Bethlehem Bible College. And just fill us in that. Just introduce yourself to us as well, because we have not had you on for one of our live streams yet. So thank you for joining us.
I'm really glad to be with you. Thanks, Rob. For the last 5 years, I've been working, developing, and directing the programs of the Bethlehem Institute of Peace and Justice. And this is a program of Bethlehem Bible College in Palestine. And we have courses that are online, and we have students from all over the world who are participating in these. And right now we have our fall semester course ongoing, and we have students from the Philippines to Australia and Europe and the
Canada.
US, Canada, yes, and
Yeah.
a big group. So I've been leading that. These are important courses. They focus on peacemaking, learning peacemaking from Palestinian leaders.
Mm.
And it's important because Palestinian Christian voices are so rarely heard in mainstream media. And so our programs seek to take their voices and share them broadly so people can grow as peacemakers where they are. So I'm working on these projects right now. You can check us out at bipj.org, Bethlehem Institute of Peace and Justice.org, bipj.org, and check out what we've got going there. So that's what I've been up to. We just moved back to the States recently, but I'm still leading the programs.
Okay. So you've been in Bethlehem for the last
Yes.
couple of years now, living there, you and your wife there. So one of the things that we've discussed on a few live streams, and I've certainly talked about in the blog post as well, is the West Bank is on fire. I mean, Muther Isaac came out last week on an Instagram post and said it's unlivable. So can you tell us a little bit about like some of your experiences, what you're seeing and what's happening there from a lived experience in the West Bank?
Okay. Well, life on the West Bank has just grown increasingly tenuous and dangerous and just very painful for people. There's a tremendous level of apprehension. Really, the last year was an incredibly painful year. For instance, in Bethlehem, where I'm based, there are just a few roads in and out, and those can be closed at any time, and then you don't know when they'll open again. Travel has become increasingly dangerous on the roads, like up to Ramallah or down to Hebron or Jericho when you can travel because of confrontations with settlers or with Israeli soldiers. And so it's become dangerous. Life on the West Bank now feels dangerous, and people really don't know what's going to happen from week to week. But then I would also say there's just a tremendous amount of emotional pain that is just that people are experiencing in the Palestinian community, because Palestinian families are closely knit together, but they're also widespread. And so at Bethlehem Bible College there, I'm sure you've talked about it, but there are a number of my colleagues there who have family in Gaza, Christians who have been sheltering in the historic churches there. And when those historic churches were hit by Israeli missiles, 18 or so Christians were killed, and that included relatives of my colleagues at Bethlehem Bible College. And so there's a tremendous sense of pain because of someone's relative is going to die tomorrow, is how it feels.
Right.
So it's, and then I would just also say that, there's just such a great sense of apprehension of what comes next. because the violence, as it's increased up near Jenin and Tulkarem and down south of Hebron, it seems to be closing in on Jerusalem and Bethlehem. And people are just wondering, how long can we live a normal life? Additionally, all those workers that worked in Israel that provided a large chunk of the income on the West Bank haven't been able to. They've all been blocked from working in Israel again. And so, thousands of families have been without income. So it's economically, it's just experiencing tremendous hardship. Plus Bethlehem and Jerusalem, tourist centers are just dead. I mean, I can walk across Bethlehem and maybe I'll see one foreigner, some kind of odd backpacker who's found their way there. But other than that, the main historic churches are empty. The tourist shops, which provide the income in Bethlehem, are empty, and it's just a desperate time right now.
Andrew, would you say that there's a fear as well that this is spilling into the West Bank, and a fear of what's going to happen to us also? It's happening amongst the people in the West Bank? Yeah.
Absolutely.
Okay. And you mentioned... go ahead.
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
I was just going to say, you mentioned Ramallah, just so people know, Ramallah is where the administrative head of the Palestinians is. It's north of Jerusalem, and so it's a vital heartbeat of the West Bank. So not being able to travel there, and when they blockade, in and out of cities, that's going to stifle the economy. That's going to stifle a lot of anxiety for family members and health. Traveling to hospitals there as well. And you also mentioned settlers, and I know we've discussed it many times, and I mentioned before we discussed it on the live streams that we've done, but settlers are Israeli citizens who live in the West Bank. The primary obstacle to justice and peace in the West Bank is the fact that there are now 750,000 or so Israelis living there, and some of them are radical settlers. And and what they mean by that is that they're ideological settlers who believe that this is our land, and they have been empowered by the far-right extremists and the Ben Gavirs and the Smotriches of the Israeli government that are wreaking havoc. So this is, I'm imagining, then causing people in the West Bank to go, hey, are we next?
Correct. That's exactly how people feel. And in the outlying villages like south of Hebron, etc., I mean, several of those villages have already been ethnically cleansed by radical settlers backed up by Israeli military who have not stopped them or hindered them. The U.S. has made a few statements, and it's put sanctions on a few of the key individuals in the settler movement that are of this ilk. But that's not slowing them down. I mean, it's they feel this is their hour. This is their hour to grab land. This is their hour to drive out Palestinian families, and they are doing it with a vengeance.
Yeah, and one of the things that happened early on in this war was Hamas said that the reason why we did this attack is, they mentioned two things in particular. One is the 5,000 at the time Palestinians that were detained in Israeli prisons, which is now up to 10,000. And they also said because of the increasing growth of settlements in the West Bank. And yet Israel has actually accelerated the settlement growth in the West Bank, which means what are we doing? How are we bringing peace? This is and by the way, we're going to have Mercy Aiken and Ben Norquist on in just a little bit.
Oh, good.
We did a live stream with them on discussing this, and Mercy was telling her stories about the displacement in the southern part south of Hebron as well. So Andrew, what would you say then would be the thing that you would want to say to the church in the West here, in terms as we finish up your time with us there? What's your word of exhortation, warning, rebuke, whatever it might be to us?
I would say, first people should understand that there are not 10,000 Palestinians or 15,000 Palestinians that can be cordoned off into a suburb or something. But there are as many Palestinians and Arab Israelis, Palestinian Israelis collectively as there are Jewish Israelis. And they're not going to go away. And the idea that they can be contained in some type of apartheid system where their movement is controlled
Wow.
and where they can live is controlled and what hospitals they can reach is controlled, is not going to work. It's completely contradictory to international values of international law. It's completely contradictory to the 21st century.
Yeah.
And I would say, to Christians that, where is their compassion?
Amen. Yeah.
What is their Christian faith if it doesn't speak for the weak?
Yeah.
What is their Christian faith if an eschatology can trump the love of Jesus?
Amen.
So I think this is a time. Not only is this we're seeing like a burnt landscape in the Middle East. We're also exposing a bankruptcy of spirituality in the Christian West. And how did that happen?
Yeah.
How did that birth of the values of Christ occur? What led to such emptiness? And what's going to have to happen for the true values of Christian faith to be reaffirmed and placed again in the center of Christianity, Christian practice? So sorry, I'm talking too long.
No, that was great. That was so good. In fact, we're not going to have any more guests on. We're going to conclude the conversation right then and there. No, that was fantastic, Andrew. No, Andrew, I want to encourage you to come back on another time. If you're watching us live, by the way, feel free to put some comments in and we'll get some comments. I think Mercy will be at the end of the conversation with me today. Maybe we can handle any questions or comments that you might have. Andrew, thank you so much for joining us. I appreciate you coming being with us today.
With you. Take care.
All right. Thank you. All right, now I'm going to bring on Ben Norquist. Ben, thank you for joining us today. And this is your second time that you've been on. Tell us a little bit about, you put your Network of Evangelicals for the Middle East, that you're the director of that. Tell us a little bit about that and a little bit more about yourself in case people didn't watch the last live stream that you were on.
Sure thing. Thanks, Rob. I really appreciate having the chance to come on with you. And
thank you.
Have this conversation on such a bitter day, as we remember what happened a year ago and everything that's happened since.
Right.
So that's how I'm coming. I'm coming with a heavy heart, but one that longs for wisdom. And so that's what, me participating in this conversation, I'm bringing a hope for wisdom with me into it. So, a little bit about myself. I'm the director of this organization, Network of Evangelicals for the Middle East. We work with not just the American church, but in particular American evangelicals on how they think about and relate to the Middle East and Palestinians and Israelis and Jews and Muslims. And so we have lots of different kinds of conversations. And it's not just about head, it's also about heart. So I really resonated with what Andrew just said about the spiritual bankruptcy of the West, because I think that that's the ocean that we are swimming in, and we're in the middle of it, and it's so deep. So sometimes the temptation is to despair, but actually I've been finding a small group emerging out of the chaotic waves of evangelicals, people who are Jesus people, who are deeply concerned about the American relationship and particularly American Christian relationship to the Israel-Palestine conflict. And more broadly to violence, just to violence, which is that's. And I think you're going to ask me here what are my reflections from the last year. A lot of them have to do with our relationship to violence.
Well, amazing, well, all right. So, what are your reflections on the last year in terms of what you've seen and experienced, and your words to us?
Yeah, thanks for asking.
You kind of set me up.
Americans have a dysfunctional, and I would say, to put a point on it, idolatrous relationship to violence. We think of violence as at the worst of moments, we turn to violence as if it were our savior. And along those lines, I've been thinking all year long about one of the very first stories in the Bible, the story of Cain and Abel.
Right.
This is after the fall, of course, and the first family has been expelled from the garden. They've been displaced out of their paradise, their home made for them by God, a place of safety, a place of security, a place of dignity, all of the things that we all long for and that Israelis and Palestinians lack and are fighting each other for and killing each other for. And here they are outside now in this very scary new world that's falling apart around them. And the first instance, I think, in the Bible of violence between people,
right,
is a murder. It's a fratricide. It's a brother who murders his brother, and God comes to the brother, Cain, and says, "What have you done?" and expels him further into
right,
a life of wandering, a life of even deeper insecurity. And it's at that moment that Cain says, I am afraid that someone is going to murder me.
Right.
And there's this deeply dark irony in the text.
Right.
The first murderer is principally, his principal fear is of being murdered himself.
Yeah.
And God says, I will not let that happen. And God makes provision. He gives Cain a mark so that no one will murder him. But the text seems to kind of suggest this. That's not enough for Cain.
Right.
Cain goes and he builds himself
a
defensive city, a
very
walled
good.
city. He takes his own security into his own hands.
Yep.
And the genealogical text that flows then after he builds a city and starts having his own children, and the generations that flow from Cain are generations of violence.
Yep.
It's not more than a few generations until the next grandson or great grandson of Cain himself is a murderer.
Right. And boasts about,
emphasizes that if God would protect Cain from being murdered, then let God protect me even more from being murdered by people that I murdered, whose family I murdered. So there's this deepening cycle of violence, this chaos. And then, and what are we to do?
Right.
Seemingly there isn't anything in our power that we can do to get out of it. But God makes provision. God brings a new line. And Seth is born. And Seth becomes the father of the father of the father of the father of Jesus. And we see what direction that genealogy goes.
Right.
And so the question in my mind is, whose line will we live in? And whenever I hear someone lining up to say, Israel has a right to defend itself, and that is the logic that they're going to build their position on, or that Palestinians have a right to resistance, violent resistance. The language of a right to violence is one that I think Christians who are seeking to live in the line of Seth need to be deeply skeptical of.
Right.
Deeply skeptical. Reject that, because that is the logic of Cain.
Yeah.
That is the folly of Cain, and we're living in it. And so when I say as Americans we have this deeply dysfunctional, idolatrous relationship to violence, it might seem weird because we're not the ones doing the violence in the Middle East, at least like vis-a-vis the Middle East. That's what we're talking about right now. There's a lot of violence here too, but when we are so deeply invested in taking sides on violence that we're not even involved in directly, that is us choosing to participate in that logic of Cain, which is violence upon violence. The last thing I'll just say here is
okay, yeah,
last. I want to, so even just sort of stepping back to social research on how cycles of violence end. The research is clear enough that violence begets more violence.
yes.
So it is in the cycle of Cain, and the social research backs that up. Violence can, and so when we sort of build these whole structures around whose violence is legitimate and whose is illegitimate.
Right.
My side's violence is legitimate. Your side's is illegitimate, which I see so much of the way that just war theory is deployed as being in that project, and so much of the back and forth and tit for tat kinds of conversations is just like that. But there's a great book called How Terrorism Ends by Audrey Kurth Cronin that I recommend, and it's based on like 250 case studies of different terrorist groups all around the world that came to an end. And how did they come to an end? And in a minuscule fraction was it because there was force deployed to suppress. In every other circumstance, it was other things that happened that brought that violence to an end.
Well, hey, send me that link for that book, and I'll put that in the notes after this gets posted on YouTube. Of course, I wrote a commentary on the book of Revelation called Revelation, a Love Story, and I think we've taken this cycle of violence and we've misapplied it to our understanding of the book of Revelation as well. So thank you so much, Ben, for joining us. I appreciate so much you taking the time to be with us and to give us a story. And of course, you can go to nimi.network and look up more information on the Network of Evangelicals for the Middle East. I think I might have a banner for it. I'll make a banner here shortly and get information over there. Thank you so much, Ben, for all that you're doing.
Thanks, Rob.
All right. Appreciate it.
Bye.
So, all right. Bye. All right. That was Ben. Oh, that was Ben Norquist. Thank you, Ben, for joining us. And now I'm pleased to invite a dear friend who I think actually has the record for the most appearances on our live stream and podcast combined. So
that's great. That's a record I'm happy to hold.
You are the man. So Gary Burge, thank you for being a dear friend and for being a voice on this issue for many, many years. And thank you for joining us here tonight. I know it's late where you are, so thank you for taking the time. So Gary, just begin with a question. What are your reflections on this war 1 year out? What do you have to say to us? Oh.
Like not dropping the mic.
Yeah, a mic drop.
Yeah, that's right. That was a mic drop. I've really had mixed emotions about all this today, and I think there are a variety of things, Rob, that we need to think about today. I think that Israel deserves its moment today, because I think at some point we do have to acknowledge that what happened a year ago today is horrendous. And I'm not just saying that because I feel obligated to say that.
Yeah.
I'm saying that because it's true.
Amen.
And also, I think we have to acknowledge that this triggered something just remarkable inside of Israel.
Yeah.
As one Israeli historian said, this thing either changed us or this thing unmasked us. And it's a pretty dark thought to imagine that Israel had always been this way and now they've been unmasked. I don't know. I think this Israel's had a whole history of thinking about, learning about all of the things that happened for centuries to them, culminating on the Holocaust. And this sense of victimization and grievance is so, so deep. And so, it isn't without reason that there are Holocaust memorials that are everywhere, and that Israeli children go through this very, very disturbing memorial in Jerusalem. So I think what happened was something profound happened today, and I think that's led to a lot of irrational behavior. It's, as my friend Bruce Fisk has said, it's almost as if Israel has lost its moral conscience. Anyway, but Israel deserves today. Today is the day when we actually step back and we say, what in the world was Hamas doing? My second thought when I'm sort of reflecting on this is we also, I think, have to have a discussion about October 6 and October 5 and October 4. Honestly, I don't think that this was simply a battle plan that was an attempt to overthrow the state of Israel. Hamas knew that that would never happen.
Right.
Any more than, say, Tijuana would overthrow California. I think instead, in my mind, what happened is Gaza exploded, and there have been many people today who have chronicled what actually has happened for the last 20 years, or you can reach back to 1967 if you wish. And what they've been living with is absolutely horrendous. And the number of people who have been killed in, say, 2014 and now just this year, you have to ask yourself, how would most populations respond if they were under a 16-year embargo and they had been bombing regularly? When Israel kills somebody who is a Palestinian, they are militants and Israel is acting in self-defense.
Right.
But I just don't think I buy that equation entirely. That is the standard line from the Israeli military, the IDF. So there's that. So I think about there are circumstances that cause this kind of thing. And I think at some level, my Jewish friends in America and the Israelis have to ask themselves some really soul-searching questions. Have we done anything to make this happen? It reminds me, Rob, of 9/11 a little bit, in a really strange way. On 9/11, the World Trade Towers were attacked, and it could have been a moment. There were many authors who said it could have been a moment where we could have stepped back and cautiously said, why did this happen?
Right.
What were their intentions? But instead, what we did is destroyed Iraq. So you think, wow, moment lost. So easily, all of us move to revenge when we should move to reflection. Anyway, so I want to give Israel this moment today. I think they deserve that. I also want to ask some difficult questions about what Israel has been doing to Gaza under occupation, a very violent occupation. Everyone calls it an open-air prison. I was just reading the other day about the embargo, Rob, and I thought, this is so crazy. Because of the possible use for military purposes, cement and steel were prohibited from coming into Gaza. But also things like glass, things like chocolate. Come on, really?
Right,
chocolate?
right.
And then pasta. This is really a crazy one. There was only one type of pasta that you could get in Gaza because Israel was controlling everything coming in. And it made me think, is this all psychological? Is this an attempt to say to people, look, you can't go to the grocery store because we're going to determine what's on the shelf. Your children will never know what chocolate tastes like. Wow. Okay. So anyway, there's the pre-October 7.
Yeah.
All right. So there's that. And my third and final thought is this. The New York Times, the Atlantic, all of the news networks right now are just showing the enormous suffering that the Israelis are experiencing right now. And not only the Israelis, but American Jews. A long article in the Atlantic today about why American Jews need to beware. Naive Americans are simply swallowing a Palestinian line, and now America is going to be an anti-Semitic place. So when it comes to my third step, and I'd like to ask, well, okay, so Israel had to defend itself, and I get the fighting for the first 2 or 3 months against Hamas. Hamas was still shooting rockets over, so okay, I get all that. But then I began to think 4, 5, 6 months in, wait, there's a problem of proportionality here.
Right.
Because there are just too many people dying in Gaza.
Right.
And then you began to see this carpet bombing, this enormous outlay of bombs on civilian areas. I've just written a chapter for a book on bombing in Gaza. And how many 2,000-pound bombs? The United States gave Israel 14,000 2,000-pound bombs.
Right.
Called the Mark 84. And these in the American arsenal, we would never use these in urban areas. We just don't. We use them for bridges. We do them for bunkers, this kind of thing. But the reason is because they're so huge. They're so devastating. And so, I don't track the moral argument that if one Hamas officer and his family is living in a 5-story building and the other residents are just living there, they may not even know about him, that you have the moral right, I guess, to drop a 2,000-pound bomb on the building and flatten it and kill everybody inside. There is a tolerance for a kill ratio, we call it, inside of Gaza right now, that is just simply shocking.
Yeah.
So we're willing to kill 100 Gazans if this Hamas officer has a certain rank. They do all these calculations. Anyway, so we've got 42, I think, right now, 1,000 dead in Gaza. Now the whole thing in Lebanon is going on, and we have open bombing in Beirut. Same thing, 2,000-pound bombs.
Yeah.
We dropped 12 2,000-pound bombs just to kill Nasrallah. So we got a couple thousand.
I heard it was 82,000 tons of bombs on a one city block to kill Nasrallah. And how many people were? There was an apartment building, right?
Yeah, they just cratered the whole neighborhood. And I don't know how to get a hold of an accurate count on this thing.
Sure.
It's really hard, but you look at it and you think, are you kidding? So how many people were you willing to kill to get him?
Right.
Anyway, so you've got that. And then in the West Bank, we've now got 500, 600, I don't know, settlers that have been murdered already. I'm thinking, wow. As another friend of mine says, friends don't let friends drive drunk. And it's almost like Israel's drunk with this thing. The 1,200 and 250 hostages triggered something inside of Israel that gave them no sense of conscience when they're doing all of this stuff. So I think today is a day of real sadness for me.
Okay.
As Ben Norquist just said, who was here, I got to listen to him for about 5 minutes. Ben is a really respected friend, colleague, scholar. Mm-hmm. He said there is absolutely no proof that ongoing violence will stop terrorists, or even any kind of resistance. Violence just begets violence.
Yeah.
Anyway, the thing is that I think violence is satisfying to a lot of us.
Right.
I'm mad at you, Rob, because what you did to me, and therefore I am going to do anything to stop you.
Right.
So we go a little crazy, and I think in this case, Israel's gone a lot crazy.
Wow.
Anyway, those are the three things that come to my mind.
Thank you so much. Yeah. And duly noted, especially. Yeah, Gary, thank you so much for joining us again tonight and for being a part of the conversations that we've had. Gary's also a part with myself and others on the Christian Forum on Israel-Palestine. I didn't show you that playlist on the YouTube channel, but if you go to my YouTube channel, you'll find it there. You can also go to the CFIP YouTube channel, find it there. We've had a number of esteemed scholars on and done some interviews there and trying to continue the conversation. So thank you, Gary, for so much for being part of this.
Those of you guys who are listening, regular listeners here, let me just sort of put in a little word for Rob. Rob has just done yeoman's work just covering these situations in Gaza and all around Israel. And Determined Truth has just been an important voice in all of this. So Rob, thank you for all of the effort you put into this. You really do work hard to make sure you do this well and do it responsibly. Well done.
Thank you, Gary. Appreciate it. Thanks so much for your friendship. I'll talk to you soon.
Okay. Bye-bye.
All right. Take care. All right. Well, last but certainly not least is our dear friend, Mercy Aiken. Mercy, thank you for coming back and joining us again. And I know you've been actually in the back room watching all of these other conversations. I know you've been part of this whole conversation, but tell us a little bit more about yourself. First off, Peace Catalyst, what you do at NEMI and Peace Catalyst there. Kind of introduce ourselves.
Well, I'm juggling NEMI, Network of Evangelicals, which you just had Ben on, and he's my colleague. And so it was really a delight to hear him. And I'm also transitioning to another organization called Peace Catalyst International, where we are more even aggressively working simply for peace, stopping violence, reconciliation, all of the aspects of peacemaking. So I'll be moving back to the Middle East later on, or early next year. I was going to say later this year in February, I hope. Yeah, to Egypt.
Yeah. And Mercy has written one of the great books. There's a number of books that you should read to kind of like introduce you to this topic. Everyone does Elias Shakor's book, Blood Brothers. But Mercy, your book, I think it's called In the Dark Streets Shining, right?
Yeah.
Is fantastic because it just tells the story of the founding of Bethlehem Bible College and just the whole Awad family. And it's a fantastic book. So I highly recommend that you do that. I'll put a link to that on the YouTube channel once we finish up here as well, but I encourage you to do that. So Mercy, you've heard all the conversations tonight. What are your reflections for yourself personally for the last year, one year later?
I've been crying all day.
Yeah.
And I hope I won't cry when I talk to you. I cried pretty much all day yesterday at church, and I'll probably be crying all day tomorrow.
Yeah.
Nonviolence International and a lot of other groups came out with this 3-pronged, wear a black ribbon on October 6th, 7th, and 8th. On October 6th, we remember what was going on in Gaza, before October 7th. And so we recognize that, we lament and we mourn. October 7th, we lament and mourn and recognize what happened in Israel and the suffering of the Israelis and Jewish people. And then on October 8th, we're going to continue with the mourning because that is when the bombing started in Gaza, which has not stopped until this day. So, I feel like we haven't even had a chance to grieve in a way over this year because it's just continued to move. There hasn't been a space to just sort of collectively, collect our breath and mourn this the way that it should have been mourned. It's like we've been mourning on the fly. And I just sort of felt the buildup of all of that over the past few days. And I've just been weeping an inordinate amount. But there's some things I wanted to talk about very quickly. I know we're running out of time.
We're doing fine. We're okay with time. As long as you're okay with time, we're okay tonight.
Okay. About peacemaking.
This is an important conversation.
Yeah, it is. And I really value the contributions that everyone has made so far. In fact, I wanted to pick up, I was so pleased that Ben brought up Lamech and Cain, because that's one of the things I've actually been thinking about a lot too. I wasn't going to bring it up tonight, but I did a little study on that a few years ago. And it's interesting that Lamech is actually the 7th generation.
7th generation. Yes, that's right.
And Enoch is the 7th generation from Seth.
Yeah.
So it's like you see 7 generations down, you sort of see the fullness of the fruit of what both of their lives represent. And so from Cain, who killed his brother, and God puts his mark on him, then you have Lamech going around saying, if Cain is avenged, 7-fold, Lamech is avenged 70-fold, and
because he killed a boy.
Right.
Yeah. He's bragging about it.
Right. And so it's like, you can see where the whole an eye for an eye, dials that way back down. Like, no, you don't get to go 7-fold or 70-fold. Let's just limit this to an eye for an eye. But what we're seeing right now is, to me, it feels like such the spirit of that line of Lamech and Cain. And it's just so deeply grievous. So I've been thinking about the blessing that Jesus invoked upon peacemakers, as the culmination of the Beatitudes, like as the natural outflowing of this way of life. Here's the crowning thing. Again, it's the 7th one. You will be a peacemaker. And this, if you follow this way of life, this is what you will be, a peacemaker. And it's really hard work. I really don't think there's anything that's more difficult work. I know May Cannon has said this has been like the hardest work of her life. And I would agree. I feel the same way. There's nothing that has been more taxing emotionally, mentally, in any way. And I know that there's a lot of people out there who probably feel the same thing. And you're wondering, how can I stay engaged as a peacemaker, or how can I even be a peacemaker? I've had people confess to me at times, like they feel vengeance in their heart, and they feel happy when they see, one side or another, depending on where they're coming from, get pummeled, or, well, finally they deserved it, and they check, they check their heart. They know that isn't right, but this is this impulse. And I think we've all felt that. I have felt that myself, if I'm very transparent over the course of this war. But Jesus, we look to Jesus as the ultimate peacemaker, the one who laid out the Beatitudes, the one who lives them perfectly. So I've really been thinking about peacemaking through the ministry of Christ, not just as someone out there who's trying to do something good, but actually as a Christian. And I think this is one of maybe my greatest points of lament over this past year, is that we haven't seen as much of that as I would love to see. But I also feel more of an urgency and an excitement in my heart, because I feel like this situation is driving us. I know it's driving me into a place where it's like, Lord, if nothing else happens before I die, I want to be a real Christian. Like I really want to follow you, and I really want to be a true peacemaker. And I will also say I've seen some beautiful Jewish and Muslim people holding these principles of peacemaking in ways that outshine Christians. And I just want to acknowledge that, but I want to take it back to Christ and really talk about this from a Christian perspective. So I just want to quickly talk about Jesus, some of the ways I see him being a peacemaker that I think could encourage us right now. In the book of Hebrews, it talks about Jesus being our great high priest, that his cries and his intercessions for all of humanity, that even right now, he is still praying for us in the heavenly realm. And I believe he's praying for all of humanity. I mean, he's praying for his followers, and he's praying for those who don't know him yet. He is praying, he's interceding for humanity. On the cross, his dying words were intercession. So there's this place where he's drawing us into him, uniting us within himself as a new creation to take on this nature that he himself also has. And it's a place that's open for all of us, whether we're Jewish or Gentile, Greek, barbarian, slave, free, male or female. This place in him provides equality of access, equal belovedness, equal value, equal welcome, equal arms outstretched, equal I love you, I would die just for you. And so I think as Christian peacemakers, I just want to bring us back to this simple I mean, this is gospel 101. It's like, we have forgotten this. We have forgotten this. It's a place where all are equally beloved, and all are held equally in the heart of God. And out of this place, there's a natural unity that just exists because we're all on this level playing field where he died for all of us, where he's interceding for all of us, where all of us are equally beloved. We don't have to try to fight anymore to, come over each other or whatever. There's a place of unity that we can just recognize, that keeps us, it protects us from going into like dehumanizing tropes about the other ones. When I recognize that person is there in the heart of God, like Jesus is interceding for him, the way he's interceding for me. Okay, that forces me to rethink these impulses that spring up from my heart that are not towards peacemaking, that are towards the way of Seth, not Seth, the way of Cain, the way of Lament, the way of violence. But we have to keep putting ourselves in this place. So I think about the priests in ancient Israel. They had to wear this breastplate as part of their priestly garments that had all 12 stones representing the tribes of Israel, and they had to carry it over their heart. So they actually had to step outside, like they didn't have an inheritance within the tribes. They almost had to be a little bit more objective. Like, I'm holding all of you with equality over my heart. And that's what I feel. That's the picture I see Jesus in his high priestly garments as our great high priest, that he holds the stones of every tongue and tribe and nation over his heart. And that when we are in him, those garments are given to us. If we clothe ourselves with Christ, this is what we are clothing ourselves with, is his priestly garments, where we have to hold all of humanity, and we can't favor, one of the tongues or tribes, maybe the one that we're from.
Right.
We have to stand a little bit more objective out of it. My inheritance, Lord, is in you. It is not in these earthly things. And I can stand with you, looking at all humanity, interceding for all of them and loving all of them. So that's like our default base position as peacemakers. I don't think as Christian peacemakers, we can enter into that ministry without recognizing that this is our great high priest. We are a kingdom of priests. We are called to a priestly ministry. There is a priesthood of every believer. These are the garments that are given to us to wear. And this is how we need to walk through the earth. And we don't get to take them off. You know, if we're clothed ourselves with Christ, we shouldn't be taking Christ off and then, you know, wearing whatever we want and then putting Christ back on. No, we're supposed to put on Christ, remain in Christ, abide in Christ. And that means that we wear, these are the only garments that we have to wear now, are these priestly garments. But, and this is where it gets really beautiful, because it isn't just the ministry of the priesthood. It is also a prophetic ministry and a kingly ministry. These are the things that Jesus was anointed in, this threefold anointing of prophet, priest, and king. And so when you're wearing these garments, you can stand in this prophetic ministry where you are not afraid to speak truth to power. Why? Because you're doing it in love. You're not intimidated to speak. Maybe you are, but you go back to your priestly position and you find you can speak truth to power. We have to confront evil, especially when it's trampling over the weak. We have to defend those who have no one to defend. We have to confront hypocrisy, and we have to confront the misuse of all of this beautiful religious language and tradition and truth and reality that has been given to us. But we do it with the liberation of all people in mind. We do it from the position of someone who is wearing these priestly garments. And so that's what I just find so beautiful in Christ. Like when I think of him in this threefold cord, I don't want to go too long because I know I've probably already gone way over. So I'm going to try to wrap up. It resets my heart. And that's just what I want to give to people today who may be feeling a lot of anguish, fury, vengeance, or whatever, that God has called us. He's opened the door for us to stand into this position, and that he does it himself by his Spirit, and that we have to lean on him more than we ever have before. I mean, I really do think, if I could just sum up, one of the things that is most burning in my heart is that we would arise as the real body of Christ.
Amen.
And be the body of Christ in the earth, clothed in priestly garments, without prejudice, not favoring any of the stones that are over us, but over our heart, but holding them all with love and speaking the truth into power for the liberation and freedom and justice of everybody else, so that they can also come into the kingdom. So that's just simple. It's just simple gospel. There's a lot more I could probably say, but I don't want to keep talking. So I'll give you a chance to.
Thank you so much. And who said women can't preach, right? That was fantastic. And thank you so much. Just for all the listeners, by the way, we have more live streams coming up this week. Thursday, we have a live stream talking about prison and people coming out of prisons and how they're getting reformed, and with the ministry of Aruka. In a couple of weeks, this is on the Determined Truth website as well. David Crump and I will be speaking at a conference. It's a virtual conference, and the registration link is on my website. And David Crump and I will be speaking on Wednesday night, the 16th. And part of what I'm presenting, Mercy, is the fact that this is what the kingdom looks like. In other words, what you're describing, the role of the priestly role, is also the kingly role, because Jesus says the way we rule in my kingdom is by suffering for the sake of the other, not by inflicting suffering, but by suffering. And obviously Ben Norquist has said the same thing. And it's like, I wrote a commentary on the book of Revelation titled Revelation, a Love Story. And it's amazing how much flack I get because it's not about wrath. It's like, okay, do you not understand this? That we want this to be about wrath. It's like, this is about the love of God, because God is love. Doesn't mean that there's not wrath. Okay, but God is love. And he's called us, when we love others, we make him known, whether it's Luke 6:35, whether it's John 13:35. Otherwise. So thank you so much, Mercy. I appreciate all that you're doing and the work that you're doing. And thank you so much, everyone, for tuning in. Mercy, let me make a mention here, and you can comment if you wish. We have a couple comments in the chat box. One is someone commented, end time generation with a series of Israeli flags. And again, we've commented at great length about the theology of it all and whether or not this is the end time generation. Obviously, I think the entire biblical New Testament text is the end time generation. I've written extensively on this in my book, These Brothers of Mine, as well as Follow the Lamb, as well as Understanding the New Testament and the End Times. And the answer is this: even if you think that, even if you want to hold to this is the end time generation and pro-Israel flag, it's still not good for Israel to bring devastation and destruction and injustice upon another people. Israel is still called to be a place of justice, and so for the sake of Israel, I think that I would respond back by saying that's not a good way to go. And then we had another sister that commented, "This will break our hearts." She said, as a Christian and someone who's only discovered in 2014 that she's half Palestinian, she says, "I can't bear to be near a church due to the large Israel-dominant teaching of land ownership." And my encouragement to you is, and I'm not sure if this is the woman I met in when I went to see Muther in Los Angeles, by the way, but we have to understand what the church is. And the church is the body of Jesus Christ. The church is what we're doing right now. Where 2 or 3 are gathered together, there he is in our midst. And there is a true church that is lamenting and mourning and weeping. But we also, I think, as Ben was talking about a little bit before, that the church has been hijacked. And I think we need to stop and think, maybe we have been hijacked. And I know some people listening to that go, "Oh, no. It's like, maybe we shouldn't be, maybe we should at least think about that as a possibility. Maybe we should think about what Mercy has just called us to do, that maybe we're not doing that and we're not doing it well enough." And so those are my exhortations as well. We'll continue to have this conversation. We hope that we don't need to have it because there's a war in Gaza any longer. We hope that this ends there as well. But thank you so much for your time, Mercy. Anything that you want to add?
Well, getting into the whole land discussion would be too much right now.
Yeah, it would. And we have done it extensively on a bunch of live streams. And I do have a book coming up on the land. I actually got it back from the editor today, so I have to look at my reviews, which we'll do soon. And so hopefully that'll be published in the next month or so. And it's a theological response to the idea of, who does this land belong to, as well as an exhortation to the church to be the church, to exhort for justice and peace and a just solution for the sake of everyone. So, all right. Amen. Thank you, Mercy. Thank you, everyone, for joining us tonight. I appreciate your time and attention. Thank you so much.